Welcome to today's episode of Just Call Dad. I am so excited today to chat with Nick Carlile. He is a inspiration to me. I'll start with that. I just met Nick, but listening to Nick's testimony, Nick's story, getting to see some of Nick's content that he puts on social media, I had to talk to Nick. And the fact that Nick took time to talk to me shows me just what kind of guy and what kind of dad he is. So Nick, I just first of all want to say thank you, and I want to say hello. How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing, Sean. Thank you so much for having me, man. The pleasure is all mine to be here, so I'm stoked.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw some of your posts on social media, I just felt like so seen. I felt so seen by the things you were putting on there. You had a post about just being with your kids and playing, and I was like, dude, that's my mission. Like, how can I play more and stress less? So, Nick, tell us about your family, man. Tell us about your kids, your wife. Give us a little bit of backstory for our listeners who might not know you.
Thanks for the kind words, man. Yeah, I've been married for 12 years now. I married my high school sweetheart. We have three amazing children. I have a 9-year-old daughter named Gia, an 8-year-old daughter named Drew, and a 5-year-old son named Judah. We live in Northern California. Both my wife and I are entrepreneurs. I was a teacher for 5 years in the public high school system out here in California prior to going all in on coaching. So I have that teaching background similar to you, man. And yeah, we're just trying to raise a healthy, God-fearing, mentally stable family and also navigate the world as best as we can, man. So it's a beautiful journey. I like to tell people that it never ends. Creating yourself as a mountain with no top is what I like to say.
Can I
There's
quote
always
that?
new levels. Please, dude, please.
I love that.
Yeah, man. So we're in it right now, man. We are in it. The interesting thing about having kids, and I'm sure you've probably seen this, is that they're somewhat of a moving target. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll go off. I was in LA last week for 2 days getting coached from my coach. I did a 5-hour session with my coach last week in LA. That was phenomenal. It was so good, man. But I got back. I was only gone for like 36 hours. And I could see that my kids had like changed, dude. And people who don't have kids might say like, dude, you're whatever. That's BS. For real. I like, you grew and you're talking different. And so it's so fascinating to me how quickly they change and how I think I have some things figured out of how I can communicate to them, or oh, this is how I should approach them. But then they're no longer 8 years old. Now they're 9 years old, and then they're 10 years old. So it's this constant game of just having to figure it out and do my best and bring in as much grace as possible.
Yeah, there's about 5 or 6 things that if people could pause and go back, they could probably just have lives change from listening to what you just said. And the first thing that I heard is this concept of time. It's this idea that as dads, we exist in a moving state at all times. We are trying to balance a career, right? And maybe change a career too. Like, there's dads listening to this, including myself, who we always are searching for purpose in our career because we want to provide. And then we've got this thought of like, I don't want to stop my kids from growing because it's beautiful, but like, what just happened? How did that happen? And then we feel this pressure too of like, oh my gosh, how do I parent this child now? I figured it out, but it changed, right? The game changed on us. It's like, as an athlete, as a coach of athletes, it's like I'm coaching a different sport every time I show up with my kids. So there's similar strategies, but the sport is different. And so I love that piece, Nick. And you're right, we're both educators. Whether you're still an educator or not, I consider people that are educators lifelong because it's a pursuit, right? As a coach, you have to be an educator. And I think what you're doing right now, first of all, getting coaching is fantastic. Giving coaching is fantastic. But being a dad makes you a better coach. Will you agree with that? It just makes you a deeper, more well-rounded coach.
Dude, absolutely. For me personally, man, the personal development and spiritual practices are best applied in the world of family and parenting and entrepreneurship, dude. Like, all of these things that I like to nerd out about and talk with clients about and discover and learn about, they're all to help me become a better father, a better husband, and a more impactful entrepreneur. And so, yeah, man, it's a arena where we can really step into a lot of these principles, a lot of these distinctions, and apply them and see how, they work and what the fruit looks like when we step into those ways of being.
And you could become the most successful entrepreneur. You could become the best coach. And if you're not a quality dad, I could argue that that doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, the impact that we make is eternal. You and I both believe that. No matter what people come to this podcast believing, we have to believe in something bigger than ourselves, right? We have to have this concept of that I'm working for something greater. And there's no greater concept than being a dad. And what I would say as I'm listening to you is this idea of like personal development. Even if you're not a dad and you're listening to this, it comes from this place of servanthood, right? You have to go through a process to become refined enough to serve, to lead. And as I listened to your testimony that you gave to your class, I was really struck by about 4 or 5 things. And the first thing that I was struck by was your authenticity. And so, Nick, I want you to just talk for a minute about this idea of how do we become authentically us. I think so many dads that are walking through life, navigating career, like we don't really know who we are. And we're identified by what we can do or what we can't do. So is there any way that you could give as a coach some advice to a dad that might be listening to this, that might be stuck in that kind of muck and mire, kind of gross part of life and don't know who they are today?
Yeah, man. Great question. There's a lot of ways to approach that.
Yep.
I think one of the first things that came to mind is what we are not. And this is what I call the false self. And the distinction between the true self and the false self has been one of the most powerful distinctions I've ever come across and has helped me so much, man. And a lot of like the ancient Christian mystics like the Desert Fathers and Desert Mothers and St. John of the Cross and St. Teresa of Avila and a lot of these old authors and mystics, they talk about the false self, true self paradigm. And so I think one of the ways to look at this is, again, what you are not. And how I like to describe the false self is made of 3 things: what I do, what I have, and what other people think about me. That's what the false self is made out of. What I do. Oh, I do this. I'm a CEO, or I'm a dad, or I'm an athlete, or I'm an MLB player, and I'm a this, and I'm a that. What I have this house, I have this car, I have this money, I have these clothes, I have these shoes, whatever. And then what other people think about me. I would argue that most people build their sense of identity, because that's what we're talking about here, identity. They build their sense of identity around those 3 things. And they end up being miserable. And I think society reinforces that idea that actually you do get your identity from those things. And I fell into that trap coming through high school and college and exiting college and getting into the workforce. And I was miserable, dude. As you saw from my testimony, I was a drug addicted, anxious, depressed, suicidal, panic attack mess, man. And through all of that suffering, it forced me to start solving my own problems. People ask, Nick, how did you get into coaching? I say, through my own suffering. And they're like, what? Right?
Because if you've never suffered, you don't get it. You don't understand. Like it's
exactly, man. And a lot of that suffering was just starting to become aware of the false self. And what it was. And the false self, different words for the false self are ego, your shadow self in the words of Carl Jung, your unobserved self. There's lots of, the flesh is how the Bible talks about, especially the New Testament. But the false self is this identity, this persona that we have created to keep ourselves safe.
Wow.
Mostly from childhood experiences. When that girl said that thing to me when I was young, this girl said I had effed up teeth when I was super young. I was like in 3rd grade and I had a crush on her, and it was like, oh.
That hits you still today a little bit.
Right,
like,
dude?
Still,
yeah. And it made me think like part of my false self was formed from that, like, oh, it's unsafe for me to smile, so I can't smile. Boom. Or like I was an athlete and I got so many, like I would get accolades when I did well, and MVP of this, or the quarterback or the point guard, and oh, what I do, this makes me lovable. When I'm good at football, when I throw touchdowns, people love me. But when I don't throw touchdowns, people don't love me. So therefore I must throw touchdowns if I'm not throwing touchdowns, then there's something wrong with me. So it's this idea of I need to perform my entire life. And if I'm not performing, then I'm unlovable and I'm unworthy, right? It's all built around this idea of what I do, what I have, and what other people think about me. Check this out, dude. This is super deep here, but I know you can hang.
I love it.
In Scripture, bro, in the New Testament, when Jesus is baptized by his cousin, John the Baptist, in the Jordan, Jesus is raised out of the water, and instantly a voice from heaven says, "This is my son, with whom I am well pleased." God declares Jesus' identity out loud, audibly in front of everybody. And then the immediate next sentence, right after that, right after Jesus' identity is declared, the next paragraph is Jesus is called into the wilderness by the Spirit. The Spirit brings him into the wilderness. And the enemy tests and tempts Jesus. What does he tempt him with and test him with? The false self. Turn these rocks into bread, Jesus. What you do. If you are the Son of God, turn these rocks into bread. He's questioning his identity, even though it was just spoken from the heavens. This is my son with whom I'm well pleased. The next paragraph is the enemy saying, if you are the Son of God, even though it was just spoken, dude, if you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. What I do. Jesus responds with Deuteronomy 6. And then after that, he says, okay, if you are the Son of God, bow down to me and I'll give you all the kingdoms of this nation, or of the world, right? What I have. Jesus also responds with Scripture. And then thirdly, if you are the Son of God, go up to the temple and throw yourself down and levitate and basically, in front of everybody and prove that you're the Son of God. What other people think about me, right? So we have this beautiful illustration in the life of Jesus right after his identity is declared, him being tempted with the false self. What I do, what I have, what other people think about me. He responds in Scripture. He overcomes the temptation. And the Bible seems to suggest that he leaves the wilderness bigger and badder and more spiritually powerful than ever. So I think that's one way to talk about this idea of authenticity. It's first off what you are not. Because once, I'm sure a lot of the listeners, they're starting to think about what I do, what I have, what other people think about me. And when you start to look at that and you can start moving it out of the way, whatever's left is you. That's the authentic you. Another way to approach this in a practical level for your listeners is starting to get in touch with the feeling of aliveness inside of your body.
Oh, I like that. That
Right?
gets you going, It gives you tangibility to this metaphysical concept.
Yeah, dude. What makes me come alive? Does reading make me come alive? Does working out make me come alive? Does hanging out with those people come alive? Does teaching make me come alive? Does going to a youth group or teaching at a youth group make me come alive? Does coding make me come alive? Does writing stories make me come alive? Does recording podcasts make me come alive? But starting to get in touch with what uniquely lights you up individually, uniquely, because we are all one of one. There are no other duplicates of a Nick Carlile or of a Sean Patrick, right? We are all unique expressions of the Creator God through Christ. And so we all have this unique blueprint, this unique calling that is only ours. Nobody else has it. But we try our entire life to be, I'm going to be the next Joe Rogan, or I'm going to be the next Michael Jordan, or I'm going to try and be like that guy or this girl, or blah, 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 blah. And we try and fit in other people's lanes, and it deadens us because those lanes don't make us come alive. And so when we start to get in touch with things that make us come alive and go towards those things, and I'm not just saying easy things, some things that are hard make me come alive. Like I spoke in front of 100 dudes in Santa Cruz not too long ago at a men's retreat. It was freaking scary, dude.
Yeah.
There were like 10 pastors in there, a bunch of firefighters, my brother and his friends. It was really scary, but it made me come alive. I left that speaking engagement fired up and energized like I never have been. Okay, that's because I have some bodily awareness and some emotional intelligence. I can see, okay, Lord, this is a path that you uniquely want me on. So that's another kind of side of that, is really starting to look for and identify these things in your life that make you come alive, man. And if you start following that feeling of aliveness, things start changing and things start happening, and God is faithful. And if you couple that with, prayer and being in communion with God and constant contact with him and telling him the truth and receiving what he's giving you, like, that's the path right there, man.
And as I listen to you, the word call is so important because that's the name of my podcast. I've actually gotten those chills a few times you've been talking just because of what you're sharing and how aligned that mission is with what this podcast is trying to do. And I believe that's a divine appointment because as you're sharing, I hope our listeners can hear just how, first of all, your technical way of explaining is brilliant. So I love
Thank
it.
you, man.
Like I'm
Appreciate that.
learning, I'm growing from this experience. And what I hear is this idea of a call. When you are called, you are challenged. And I think a lot of people don't want to get called because they don't want to be challenged. And what I would say to any listener out there who is ready to become their best self, who wants to do what Nick is saying, who wants to be a call away from their kids, like to be so close to their kids or so close to their creator, wherever you're at in your walk that you can be a call away, you have to be willing to be challenged.
Well done, dude. Very well done.
And that is where I am navigating right now as we're thinking identity. Okay, yes, Nick, I'm a listener. Dude, I'm all in. I'm ready to run through a brick wall. I hear these words. But now comes the challenge piece, right? Because especially somebody with your story, there is never someone that has a story like yours that doesn't have opportunities for fallback, doesn't have opportunities for backslides, doesn't have opportunities for failure to be something that speaks louder than faith. And so, Nick, as you navigate this concept of, okay, I've been called, I'm chasing after coaching, I've been called, I'm trying to be a great dad to my 3 babies, as they grow, I'm going to be okay with the fact that I can't stop them from growing. I can't stop them, but I can run alongside them in this race called life. What do you do when you're faced with a challenge? Because I know a lot of dads out there, myself included, know that the challenge is coming, but we are afraid that if we fail, we'll fail so much that we'll never be there for our family. So how do you navigate that? Because that's something that I want our listeners, we could save a life today with this conversation, legitimately. I know that's severe and serious, but I mean it. Like,
I agree,
emotional
man.
life, a physical life, whatever that is. If you're being faced with a challenge right now, how would you navigate it, Nick, or how do you navigate those challenges?
Let's go, man. I'm a stickler on language. I think language is completely overlooked. And just in your description of how do you navigate a challenge, everything that comes after that, if I am navigating a challenge, it's going to be hard, and because it's a challenge, and it's going to be a struggle, and I'm going to have to navigate it, and I'm going to have to and navigating requires like a ton of knowledge, and you have to be attention to detail, and right. And so I just want to point towards how we are creating this challenge with our language.
Okay, I like
Right?
that. I like it.
Right? I like to say that words are not descriptive, they are creative. Words are not descriptive, they are creative. So when you say the traffic is killing me, you are not describing your world that the traffic is killing you. You are actually creating the world where the traffic is killing you. The only thing that's happening is that you're parked on pavement around a whole bunch of other metal vehicles. That doesn't have the ability to kill people. It's your language. Oh, this traffic is killing me. That's actually creating the suffering.
Sure.
Right? So that's where I'd first go, is the language that I am using around my problems. People will tell me, Nick, I need a work-life balance. I need a work-life balance. And that seems like a good idea, a work-life balance. And you'll probably see that on Instagram and people promoting work-life balance. But listen to the energetics behind those words, dude. Work-life balance implies that there's like this very like meticulous balance that must occur, and if it's not right, then something's going to come crashing down and like ruin everything. So I would invite people to see it as, what if it was a work-life mosaic? What would that look like? And there's a huge energetic difference between those two sentences: work-life balance and work-life mosaic. Feel that?
I do.
So that's where I would first offer your listeners, is just to look in that direction of how are you creating your words or your world with your words. And this is biblical, dude. You and I, Sean, are created in the image of a creator God, right? Created in the image of the creator God. How does Yahweh, the creator God, create? How did he create all of this? Spoke it into existence. Let there be light, right? He's in Genesis, he speaks things into existence. His word is how he creates. And so you and I and every one of your listeners are made in that image. And so our words also create. If I go out with my friends and say, oh, my wife's driving me nuts, and then I go home and try and walk into the door and see my loving wife, I'm not going to see my loving wife. I'm going to see my wife who's driving me nuts, because I just told all my friends my wife drives me nuts. Right? So that's the first thing that I would offer, is just being intentional with our language. I like to say that my word, I keep this wand right here during my coaching sessions. It's a Dumbledore wand.
I was going to say, I like that.
My word is my wand. My word is my wand. I create with my word. Hey, let's go get lunch next week. I go get lunch next week. One of the things I say to myself is, I am endlessly captivated by the most beautiful woman on the planet, Lindsay Michelle Carlile. That is one of my declarations of who I am being every day.
Amen.
I am endlessly captivated by the most beautiful woman on the planet, Lindsay Michelle Carlile. That is an identity that I live into, Sean. And when I walk out of this door right here and I walk into my kitchen, guess who I see? The most beautiful woman on the planet, Lindsay Michelle Carlile, because I created it with my words. So that's where I first go. The other side of that is looking at challenges as, and we could use whatever language we want, but we'll just use the challenge language. But there's this quote from Peter Crone, who's he calls himself the mind architect. He says, life will present you with the people and circumstances that reveal where you are not free. Life will present you with the people and circumstances that reveal where you are not free, which is really, really powerful. And we could spend an entire episode just talking about that.
That could be the title of the episode, and we could just talk for an hour. I mean,
it's not good, right?
Yeah, right.
So we talked in the beginning about leveling up, how creating yourself is a mountain with no top. Life will give you exactly what you need to become the ultimate version of yourself. It'll allow you to do that. It's going to give you the exact perfect curriculum. I call it your spiritual curriculum, right? All right, here's your life. Here's your spiritual curriculum, Nick. Your sister's going to die here. You're going to be a drug addict. This is going to happen. You're going to panic. You're going to have this and that and this and that. The version of Nick Carlile who is able to evolve through that, and I don't say that in a weird way, but level up through that, who is able to be at peace with all of that, is a really powerful version of Nick Carlile for the kingdom that the world needs, I would argue. So, like, biceps don't grow unless I tear that thing in half in my gym.
That's right.
You know? You don't get better at the guitar until you get calluses on the fingers. But it's this process of refinement. So I like to see challenges as, all right, what can I create that will make this challenge irrelevant? That's a really powerful inquiry, dude. Hear that again. So if someone brings me a like, oh, Nick, I'm struggling with my wife, or this or that, or I'm struggling in the batting box, or because I work with some MLB guys, but it's okay. What do you want to create that will make all of this irrelevant? Right now, you're struggling with your wife in regards to finances, and you guys argue. You have a great marriage, but you argue about finances. What can you create together that will make all of that irrelevant? Well, we could create like a monthly meeting, and I guess I could create like a spreadsheet, and I ask people this question, and all of a sudden they start coming up with the answers, bro. And I'm like, there you go, right? And so we can exactly we can create. We step into our ability to create, to level up, to make these challenges irrelevant in our life. The other thing that you said that I also just want to touch on is, what do you do? What do you do, Nick, to
what's the
overcome?
action? Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful. I would offer that as well is looking in the wrong direction. I do not advocate any doing. I don't provide people with doing solutions. Doing is not where I coach, and most coaches coach in the land of doing. Here's what you need to do. You need to do this. You need to write your wife a letter, or hold her hand, or do weekly date nights, or kiss her more, or you need to do. You need to intermittent fast, and you need to meditate, and you need to do. I do not operate in the land of doing, because from the work that I have done with myself, it has become abundantly clear to me, Sean, that all doing comes from being, who I am being.
Yeah.
If I am being loving, then I am going to do loving things. And so people who are like, how can I have a better relationship with my spouse? What do I need to do? All I want them to see is all you have to be is love. If you go out into the kitchen and you're being love, I don't care what you do. All you have to do is be love, because if you're being love around your spouse, all the doing that comes out of that is going to be loving. Because being, one of my favorite coaches, Steve Hardison, says, being is the seed and doing is the fruit. So if it's an apple seed, it's going to produce apples. The tree is going to produce the fruit of apples. So if it's a loving seed, if I'm being loving, the fruit of my being loving is going to be love. The deeds are going to be love. So I like to operate in the land of being, commitments to who I'm being. So one of my declarations of who I'm being is, I already said one of them, I am that. I'm madly in love with the most captivating woman on the planet, Lindsay Michelle Carlile. I have different declarations of who I am being in the world. My first one is, I am who Yahweh says I am, and I lack nothing. If I am being, I am who Yahweh says I am, and I lack nothing, I don't have to really think about what to do for challenges, right? If I'm being that and if I'm being that I lack nothing, I'm just going to take care of whatever needs to get taken care of, because I don't lack anything. I have all the resources necessary. I'm just going to get it done, right? All the answers are going to come right there. Boom, I can have hard conversations. Boom, I can do hard things. Boom, I can make, whatever. And so that's another just thing that came up as you were talking is, I'm not really worried about, like, your listeners. I don't care about what you do. I care about who you are, who you're being in the world. And if you have a commitment to being the type of person who overcomes, then you are going to overcome.
Mm-hmm. I think the most important piece that everyone needs to hear from what you just said is, first of all, is this idea of being okay with you. You wake up every day with you. And if I were to go back and if I were to tell the younger version of me who was an athlete, who was competing, if I could tell that version of me one thing, I would tell them to not try so hard. And I know that's
Hmm.
really weird. I know that's a really odd thing to say. Nick, you and I both coach high level athletes. I've coached from the high school to the professional level athletes, mentality, physicality, ideas, all these things. And at the end of the day, I've coached the right way, but I haven't coached from the right place because I'm
Hmm.
trying to help them by showing them what to do. And I think a lot of times as coaches, we get stuck in that do cycle. What am I doing? How am I doing? Am I helping this kid? Am I, I've worked with 185 kids today, Nick, before I hopped on this podcast. And every human that I encounter, I care about them. And I care
Hmm.
about them emotionally. And I'm realizing that as you speak and as I hear this concept for other dads or other listeners or athletes, because we might have those types of listeners, it's the concept of being overwhelmed by the do. We are overwhelmed by it.
Hmm. Hmm.
We're covered in this in these action steps. You always, every time you read a book, there's always action steps at the end. Or every time
Yes.
you journal, we always say, okay, what's your action steps? And as educators, we ask kids that question, and I wonder now, listening to you, if that's something we need to reframe and reshape. Instead of what are you going to do, is who are you going to be? And I
Well
think
done.
and I think that's something that if you're listening to this podcast and you can take one thing from it as a dad, when your kids walk through the door or you walk through the door, whatever the narrative is, it's not about what you do. I had one guy say, "Oh, you got to push your kids out of the way and go right to your wife and hug her." Well, what if that, and show that your kids that you love them, or
Hmm.
you got to make sure you pick your kids up and affirm them. What if it's not that? What if it's just I come in and
Hmm.
I'm dad and I read the room emotionally and I do what's needed in that moment and I don't feel shame for not doing quote what I'm supposed to do.
Boom. Very well done, man. Very well done. We're talking about, again, identity here, dude. And I think that like, identity is the furthest we can go upstream. Doing is way farther downstream. But identity, who we are, determines what we believe.
Hmm.
What we believe determines what we feel, right? What we feel determines what we do, and what we do determines the results.
Hmm.
Another way to talk about that, to say that differently, is that identity produces thinking, thinking produces feelings, feelings produces our actions and inactions,
Hmm.
all of those, and then our actions and inactions all determine our results.
Hmm.
So if we go at the level of doing, we're just ignoring the feeling, the belief, and the thoughts, and the identity that's all before it, right? We're
Right.
ignoring half of the equation. But if we go to the furthest upstream, one of my favorite definitions of identity is that which you are most committed to. That which you are most committed to. If we go the furthest upstream to identity and we find that we are most committed to I am who Yahweh says I am and I lack nothing, I am that I'm endlessly captivated by the most beautiful woman on the planet, Lindsay Michelle Carlile. If that's who I'm being, if that's my identity, what another line that I have is I am that I'm the heroic father to my 3 children who teach me more than I teach them. If that's who I'm being, I am that I'm a heroic father to my 3 children who teach me more than I teach them. If I walk in the door to my house and I am being, I am that I'm endlessly captivated by the most beautiful woman on the planet, Lindsay Michelle Carlisle, and I am that I'm the heroic father of these 3 children who teach me more than I teach them. If that's who I'm being, who cares what I do when I walk
Mm.
through the door? I'm going to smother them. I'm probably going to tackle them. I'm going to give my. It's the most beautiful woman on the planet. I'm going to
Right.
pick her up off the ground and take her to the couch and tell
Right.
the kids to go to the room. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? So
Yes, I
it's
do.
this identity level that is the furthest upstream that takes care of everything else.
And I think what a lot of listeners probably to this are doing, at least if they're dads like you and me, is we have this list of do's in our head. We play it over and over, right? Those of us, I know for me, that wrestle with anxiety, right? First of all, I get frustrated when you go to the doctor. They do all the tests. They say, "Hey, you got anxiety." It's like one of the most anxious moments that you have, right? They're like,
Yeah.
hey, you got, and then you're like, okay, how do I fix that? Well, I think one of the things that I know I'm working on is almost like a mental play sheet, right? Where I have this idea. I'm working on 2 books right now, and one of them is called Design to Compete, because I truly believe that we can design our own internal competitor. I believe we
Hmm.
have responsibility to design our internal competitor beyond our actual days of competing. And so I put 36 years of life into this book and this idea of how do we design it. And one of the big things that I'm realizing, Nick, as I'm writing this book, is that my emotions and my feelings are oftentimes not the same thing. Emotions are more
Hmm.
of something that lasts longer. It's something that is an identity, more identity driven, and it's okay. Like I'm sensitive. I'm a
Hmm.
sensitive person. I'm not
Hmm.
macho man. I'm not all these things, but I want to be heroic. So like
Hmm.
how do you navigate that? And I think the coolest thing is disassociating your emotions and your feelings. Feelings are fleeting, and oftentimes feeling fuel anxiety. So feeling
Hmm.
nervous or feeling like I didn't do enough, like oh my gosh, I should have hugged my wife, or oh my goodness, I should have said hi
Hmm.
to my daughter, or whatever it is as a dad or as an athlete. I wish I would have done this play the right way, or I wish the outcome would have gone my way. Whatever it is, we can go any
Hmm.
cycle. You and I could talk both probably for days on this, 2 people, but I think at the end of the day, what I'm learning is I'm trying to create this design my own competitor beyond sports. Is I've got to disconnect or disassociate from emotions and feelings fueling each other. And I have to
Hmm.
understand that who I am, my emotional state, will be healthier and I will feel better if I start from the top down. And I call that your emotional jersey. So I talk
Hmm.
about the name on the front versus the name on the back. So one of the big things, and this is the one thing I want to kind of end our podcast with, I want to let you talk on this topic,
Hmm.
is this
Hmm.
concept of the emotional jersey. We put
Yeah.
on jerseys for a short amount of time in life, right? We put this jersey on, we put a shirt on, but we carry the residue, right, or that sweat equity from the time that we put in on that team. So, Nick, I think one of the things that I want to get from you today for our listeners is
Hmm.
okay, maybe I hear this, I need an identity that's beyond me, right? Maybe they hear that. Maybe they hear I need to be instead of do. But then, like, you got to get in the game and play. Like, how do we get in the game of life and play without getting stuck in these negative cycles so that we can rep our jersey and our emotional jersey proud in this
Hmm.
season of our life?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Man, we could talk about a lot within that. One of the travesties within public education that honestly is a damn shame within Western Americans' educational system is that we are not taught emotional intelligence. We are not taught about emotions and feelings. No one ever told us what they are or where they come from. And that was a huge part of my story, is learning what they are and how to deal with them and how to look at them and view them and understand them. And I this might be controversial, but I did the therapy route. I did the get a counselor, the psychiatry route, the SSRIs route, and none of that worked for me. Because I was just given a label and some meds to deal with my emotions. The guy who wrote the DSM-3, which is the manual used by psychiatrists to tell you, oh, you have generalized anxiety disorder or depression or panic disorder, whatever. It's the book that tells you what you are diagnosed with. The guy who wrote it later said, I think we made a mistake and we pathologized a lot of the normal human experience. And so that's where I'd start, is that life, we growing up in America, our country was founded on the idea of the pursuit of happiness. And so all of us Americans think that we have to be happy all the time. And that if we're not happy, then something's deeply wrong with us. I should be always in flow and I should always be joyful and smiling. And if I'm not, then I need to take some medication and I need to figure it out because I'm broken. That is a misunderstanding. If we look at the perfect human who ever existed, Jesus of Nazareth, his life was far from being happy all the time. He was beat and spit on and lied about and cried. His friends died. He was homeless. He was hungry. He was tempted in the desert. He was brutally murdered. All of all of humanity falls into what one of my old coaches calls the 50-50 of life. Life is half comfortable emotion and half uncomfortable emotion. It's the 50-50. Everyone experiences the 50-50. Elon Musk experiences the 50-50. Bill Gates, Nick Carlile, Sean Patrick, Jalen Hurts, who just won the Super Bowl. Every single human on earth experiences the 50-50. And when we fight against the 50-50, it just produces even more suffering. Because, there's something wrong with me, because I shouldn't be feeling sad, and I shouldn't be feeling low energy, and I shouldn't have moods, and I shouldn't let that affect me, and blah, blah, blah. And we're just fighting against reality the whole time, causing even more suffering. Mm-hmm. So I think the first part is just understanding that these emotions are a part of life. They are part of the human experience. Mm-hmm. And they can also be signposts towards where we need to grow and level up and what we need to pursue to help not eradicate those emotions, but move past them. So that's where I first start, is understanding that if you are experiencing these things, there's nothing wrong with you. This is exactly how it should be. This is part of the human experience. And if we throw self-judgment on top of that, then it creates even more struggle. The other thing is that emotions are neither good nor bad. They just are. They just come up. Feelings are neither good nor bad. They just come up. It's just energy, chemistry inside of the body. And when we label them as bad and negative, and that's a bad emotion and I shouldn't have that emotion, again, we are denying the reality of the human experience. We can instead see it just as an energy. I like to use the words, how fascinating. There's an energy of anxiety inside of my body right now. That's fascinating. Yeah. I feel it bubbling up. There is a huge difference, Sean, between saying, I am anxious, and there's an energy of anxiety inside of my body.
That's life-changing for people if they use that phrase.
Right?
It's a total different flip on everything.
Exactly. One of them, it's an identity statement.
It's your jersey. It's the jersey concept.
Exactly.
You're saying
no
that's
space.
my team. And if you say that's my team, then you're going to play for that team. And you're going, and that's exactly what I'm trying to get at with the emotional jersey, because I'm writing kids books for kids to teach this concept too. And we have one coming out called the emotional shoes, because we have to think about our steps. It's biblical in a lot of ways, but it's also just practical. I mean, no matter, honestly, I feel like if someone listened to this podcast today, even if they didn't have the same faith that you and I have, they could get the same type of grounding from this podcast. It's an idea of dude, your identity, if it's wrapped up in your if it's wrapped up in your talent, the minute you blow your knee out, the minute that you yell at your kid, the minute that you are teaching and you respond in a way you didn't mean to, all of a sudden your identity's wrapped in that emotion or in that fleeting feeling. And what we have to be cautious of, and what I think we really want to end here with, is this concept of, okay, I've got this. I know that I do need to change. Most people understand I need to change something, but I don't need to change everything, because I'm perfectly and wonderfully made. And I think that's what I hear from you, and what I want everyone as they're ending this to hear, is that you are enough. You might have these feelings, and you might have even identified as, I am anxious, or I am nervous, or I am weak, or I am not, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, you can make that change, not in what you do, but in what you say. And I really want to take that from you today, and I want to share that today, and I want to use that in my own life, because at the end of this day, this actual physical day, there will be rest, right? There will be that rest you talked about earlier. But then I get up and I do it again. And if I'm not careful, I get in a cycle of just doing, and I'm not enjoying. And I think, to the point you said, it's not about enjoying happiness. It's about enjoying the journey. And I think journeys are going to have fun struggle. And so I hope today, for our listeners and for me, that I can begin to embrace those feelings of anxiety or those feelings of not enough as instead an energy. As instead, this is part of my fuel. Can I use it? Can I burn it? Can I create in me? There's a song by Ren Collective, Create in Me. And it's this idea of what can I create in me today that then can bubble out to others and bubble over. And I love that, and I'm going to resonate with that, and I appreciate you because what we talked about today, we could talk about all day. But I want to give you 60 seconds at the end of this. And I want you to do this for me. I love this. As an educator, I do my 60-second drill with my track kids all the time. I said, you got 60 seconds to tell someone on the other end of this podcast why they matter, number one, and why, number two, why it's worth the challenge to become your best self. So why they matter and why it's worth it. Why is it worth it, Nick? Like what's all this? What's the end of all this? Why am I doing this thing?
Let's
So
go.
you 60 seconds. All right, we're ready.
Yeah, let's go. The reason that you matter is because you were intentionally created by the Creator God. The highest form of spirituality is self-love. The highest form of spirituality is self-love. Why? Because God is endlessly in love with you, regardless of what you do. Even on your worst day, God is overwhelmingly in love with you. So if you cannot love yourself, that means that you know better than God. You can love yourself because God is endlessly in love with you. If you can't, then you're basically saying that you know better than God. God meticulously created you for intention. The reason that you can't love yourself is because you are out of integrity. Your conscience won't let you love yourself because you keep judging yourself because you know you're out of integrity. The word conscience in the book of Hebrews literally means one's self-evaluation to stand in the presence of God. One's self-evaluation to stand in the presence of God. When you start living in alignment with those natural callings and what you feel is right to do, and you start living in integrity, then you will be able to see and accept and love yourself even more and see how worthy and beautiful that you have been created. All of this is happening for you. All of the suffering, all of the circumstances, all of the events are there to help you become more and more Christ-like. That means that you are growing towards spiritual maturity. You're moving in the right direction, growing, progressing. And growth equals happiness. The most miserable people on the planet Earth are the people who have the same job, same emotions, same patterns, same lack of discipline, same body, same thoughts, same feelings, same struggling relationships, same struggling marriage, same everything. Those are the most miserable people on the planet who just want to numb themselves out and deteriorate away. The people who are the most happy on the planet are the people who are constantly leveling up and progressing and becoming more and more Christ-like, seeing the challenges in their lives as stepping stones to level up and become the highest version of themselves, the most powerful version of themselves, so that they can give it away and express the uniqueness of love that they are for the kingdom, and the garden can come back on earth as it's going to do, the garden city. We are here to level up so that we can help expand God's kingdom. You have a unique role in doing that. And the challenges and obstacles and sufferings that are in your life are the path to get there.
It's beautiful. Nick, I just want to take a deep breath together and make sure that we are centered as we end this podcast. And we thank the Creator. We thank God. We thank the fact that we have an opportunity to take that breath.
Yeah.
And we hope today that our conversation reaches the ears of somebody who needs to hear it.
Yeah.
Of somebody who can trust that this is their moment, that they believe, maybe for the first time ever, that they are enough and that they can be a call away because they are the person they were created to be. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Just Call Dad. Thank you for listening to Nick and Sean chat about being dads, being humans, and leveling up along the way. We hope this video finds you well, and if it doesn't, stop, take 5, and proactively praise the you that you are on the way to where you're going. All right. Let's make today the best version of that day. Today is your day one to be you.
Let's go.